hard question, which is how to address tensions among minority groups. So it isn't always that the person who has the negative attitudes is someone who is white and male. It might be tensions that arise between Asian immigrant shopkeepers and African American patrons on both sides, between Asian immigrants and Latino immigrants. What are the constructive ways that we might approach this particular issue? Again, for all of the panelists.
Well, let me start because I think I have had a lot of experience, and I don't want to pick on him, but I went to school with Stuart Quo. We've known each other for almost 40 years. When I was at Maldiv, everything that we did with John Mack in LA, redistricting. I did with Stuart and other, I think it's the reaching out and putting on the table the issues and the tensions. I think the biggest mistake that we can make is to say that because we're minorities, we're pure and we don't hold those stereotypes that other people hold. I think acknowledging the fact that there are tensions, and a lot of them are economic tensions. And how do we get ourselves on the table to work together on census, on redistricting, on education cases, on a whole variety of cases? Because, as I have said, if you work on the differences, we're going to have a lot of differences. But if you start with trying to find the common threads, in LA, once again, if you go into Koreatown, when an immigrant says he's speaking a different language, he's not talking about speaking English. He's talking about speaking Korean. It's sort of the interaction and the understanding and building the bridges between the communities. Because once you begin to understand one another, Korean food is awfully hot. Well, I'm very comfortable with hot in the Mexican community with the chile. So it's sort of finding those commonalities rather than dwelling on it. But I'm going to tell you, the tensions are real. And we need to deal with them, because if we don't, then, they're going to get to the point where we're not going to be able to control them, and it'll be us among us rather than us among them.
Right, and a lot of the tensions tend to flourish because we don't talk to each other, and we basically talk to each other, and they build up. And so the best thing you can do about that is to have the conversations, join the coalitions, and find the common things that you can agree on. There will always be one or two things that you want to agree on, but at least you're talking.
I guess I would just throw out that what is purely racial or ethnic and what's economic. And during the last presidential election, how often did we hear questions about whether Latino voters would vote for an African American? And it was a legitimate concern, because there's obviously been, power struggles between various communities of all kind. But, Barack Obama did extraordinarily well with Latino voters. And then what's just purely economic? And I think when you get into an inner city environment, a lot of times there are resentments of is a shopkeeper exploiting the people in a neighborhood? Or conversely, is someone who owns the shop feel like they're being victimized through theft or robbery or whatever? You have these resentments up and down that are driven, I think, where it's exacerbated by ethnicity and race, but where a lot of it is a matter of economic resentment going up or going down, one way or the other. And it's something that I don't necessarily have a solution for, but it's certainly something that exists and builds a lot of tension in cities.
Okay, and finally, a question about a specific political figure. This is directed mainly to Charlie, but to all the panelists. We just saw the election of Joseph Cao from Louisiana, the first person of Vietnamese descent to serve in the United States Congress. What are his prospects to be re-elected in a district that is very much mixed, does have some people of Vietnamese background, but is also very much heavily black?
Wow, this is really hard. Let me put it differently. What are the prospects of a Republican getting who was elected in an election that had been rescheduled because of a hurricane, and thus there was virtually no turnout, and against with an incumbent that had about as serious a criminal problems as you could possibly have and not already be in jail, I'd say his prospects are not particularly good. But it has nothing to, the thing is, his problem isn't that he's Vietnamese. His problem is he's a Republican, in an overwhelming Democratic African-American New Orleans district. And so, look, do weird things happen from time to time? He might survive. He might. I wouldn't bet $1 on him, but he could. We've seen it happen before, but the odds aren't so good in a real election with a substantial turnout. And and I think his only hope is if Democrats just have a zillion different candidates and have a lot of infighting and just can't get together behind somebody. But I think it was. I've heard only good things about him, but it was sort of a very unusual circumstance that led to his election, and it would require another really unusual one for him to get reelected. But like I say, hey, you never know. I'm the guy that when a state senator from Illinois named Barack Obama was coming in to see us about running for the U.S. Senate, that I pawned the meeting off on somebody else. I didn't think he had a chance. So, what the hell do I know?
Okay, we have time for just very brief 10-second closing comment. So perhaps in the same order that we began, Mr. Everett.
Again, was delighted to be here to learn, and I did learn, and I thank you for having me.
It has been an absolute pleasure to be here, and hopefully I can be invited again.
I think that the United States has relationships with I don't know how many countries are there in the world, 180 or there is no more important relationship in our country, in terms of the world, than between, I think, the United States and China. And I think any group of people who are dedicating to fostering understanding between the United States and China, there's just no higher sort of international calling than that, because all you have to do as an American is go to China and look and say, wow, we could be their enemy or we could be their friend. And one of them strikes me as a really bad idea. And the future of the world is that direction, and we've got to understand each other and build friendship and relationships, and to build a strong economy and allow upward mobility for everyone around the world. And so what you do is just awfully, awfully, awfully important for the world. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to thank my fellow Committee of 100 member Helen Zia, chair of our Media Committee, as well as from the New York office of C100, Yong Lu, the research director, without whom this work could not have been done. Again, I invite you to take a look at the Committee of 100 website, where the entire survey is available for downloading with all of the statistical detail. It will be printed and will be available in hard copy shortly. I'd like to thank the following foundations for their very generous support: the Rockefeller Foundation, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Verizon Foundation, the Minneapolis Foundation, of course the Wells Fargo Foundation for their very generous ongoing support of Committee of 100 activities, and most recently we received a grant from the Prudential Foundation. So with that, that brings to a close this panel on our survey. Please join me in thanking once again our distinguished panelists.